In this video, we're going to talk about the number one mistake that most coaches make, which is why most coaches don't have the business that they want. And if you can't avoid the single most critical mistake, well, then you don't have much of a chance at success. And this isn't just about my personal journey of 15 plus years in the industry and millions of dollars that we made. It's what have I seen for the people that come into the industry? They have all these goals and dreams. What is the distinction between coaches who succeed and coaches who fail? It's this topic that we're going to break down in this video. Now make sure you watch the whole video. It's a deep discussion, many layers, and you never know when that thing is that's going to be said that could change everything for your life and business.
All right, let's dive into another exploration of what's the difference between coaches that fail and coaches that succeed. I feel like that could be, a title or a series or something, right? The exploration of, why people win and why people lose. And specifically in the coaching industry, this number one reason, in my opinion, is really about your overall drive. We spend so much time in these myopic targets. I know that's one of your favorite words now. So I use that for you. In these targets of myopic focus, we want clients or we want a dollar amount and all that stuff is fine, but that's not fuel that's going to create a massively successful coaching business, in my opinion. And, I've been doing this for over 15 years. I know, Michelle, you've been in this game for many years, and we're constantly looking at what's the difference. What are the distinctions between the people that succeed and the people that fail? And we've got so much evidence now. And this is one of the most critical dichotomous relationships, meaning you're either focused on this or you're focused on that. And the distinction here is between success and mastery. And this is something that we coach our normal clients in, people that don't necessarily want to be life coaches, in all the time. What is your real focus? And one of the biggest reasons why people don't hit their goals is because their whole goal is to hit their goals, right? It's not really focused on the thing that's required for humans to want to keep going when times get tough. And in the coaching industry, if you're focused on success and you're following all of the assembly line, one size fits all, like shortcut approaches, you're going to really struggle. But if you're focused on, and not just focused on, but committed to mastery, then you can have the most incredible business, but enjoyment of the process all along the way. We were talking about this the other day. I said, if you're committed to mastery, you're going to trip and fall over $100,000. You're going to trip and fall over it, but then get back up and keep going, because that's not the goal. And many of you know that is my story. I was focused on mastery for months. And then as soon as it all started to click over the next 10 months, we made about $300,000, but it was in the first 8 months where we didn't make hardly any money at all, focused on mastery, that set up the success. And most people are flip-flopped. Most people are focused on making money right away. How do I get clients? And all of that is fine. There's nothing wrong with being successful. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be successful. The challenge is what's actually going to produce success. And my experience is focusing on mastery will bring with it success, but focusing on success will not necessarily bring with it mastery. My experience, and I know yours is too, is that focusing on success will usually bring with it misery, not mastery. And even if you succeed at the targets that you're looking at, and you're focused on the success, thinking that they're going to make you feel good about yourself, thinking that they're going to inspire you to get up every day and keep going to work, you're going to be wrong, because the human brain, well, let me break this down. The human intellect inside the brain, the intellectual ego, is seemingly driven by those targets, driven by the tangible measurements of success. We want the money. We want the body that we think we want. We want all these things that we can measure. But the soul and the unconscious mind in the brain is not driven by that. It's driven by experiences, not measurements. And so the main difference here is the nature of success versus the nature of mastery. And that's what we're going to break this down or break down here in this conversation, and really hopefully get you to a point where you truly understand the essence of these two things so that you can apply them in your business for those of you that want to be coaches and build a business, but also, really anywhere in life. So before we get into the dichotomy of these two things, what do you want to add?
I just love this so much. I was getting all excited. I'm like, if you focus on success, you said misery, which was perfect. I was like, failure. that's what I felt, because I think oftentimes we're not even, those expectations that we have, those goals, those tangible targets, Sean, they're not even ours. Right? It's what we saw on some kind of Facebook ad that we're supposed to want, or somebody told us that this is what makes, a six figures is what makes a successful coach, or X number of clients is what makes a successful coach, or, whatever size is what makes a bikini body. It doesn't even have the ability to actually create that fulfillment that you spoke to.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That fulfillment piece is, what's the point of being successful if you're not going to be fulfilled? And you can be successful without being fulfilled. You can also be fulfilled without being successful, according to these definitions that we're talking about. But what if the definition of success is fulfillment? And we are unwilling to create anything that is successful that makes our head happy unless it makes our heart happy first. And I do think it should go in that order, because if we think that our heart's going to be happy by checking the boxes that mean anything to our egos, we're going to be miserable and we're going to actually experience failure, as you said. And so we have to understand, like, what generates true happiness. And, I talk about this on this channel all the time, that there are a lot of coaches who are massively successful by all of the measurements of success, and they're literally depressed. And I've talked to coaches who've made millions of dollars and they're suicidal. And that's just confirmation that hitting all those targets, especially the ones that are not even ours, and I love that you brought that up, doesn't have the capacity to make us happy, unless it's just by sheer coincidence and accident that we take somebody else's goal, fulfill it according to their recipe, and feel fulfilled for us personally by the fulfillment of somebody else's goal. It's crazy. And there's an element of the unconscious mind. This is not the point of the video, but I just want to mention this just a little bit, and I'm sure it'll come up as we continue to dissect here. There's an element of the unconscious mind that craves shortcuts, and it craves to be able to check the boxes of what our ego wants when it comes to success. So we're really battling the desires of these two entities, right? Our ego and our heart, essentially. And what our ego wants is success. But the reason our ego wants success is usually to make ourselves feel better about ourselves. Some form of external evidence, external approval, external validation that lets us know we're a good person, we're a smart person, we're a successful person. That's how the ego works, at least this part of the ego. And I think the ego gets a bad rap, but when we're putting it up against what the ego desires is when it comes to success, and what the heart's desires are when it comes to success, it's really important that we understand how different they are. Because if we don't understand this, then it's just too easy to get caught up in all the things that we see out there. And almost everything is attractive to our egos. Not a whole lot of stuff is actually attractive, like that we see in marketing, is actually attractive to our hearts. And one of the reasons is because the egos are the ones that are making a lot of the buying decisions. And so the egos don't want to hear about that stuff. If you're going to sell to the ego, then attract to the ego, right? Offer the things that the ego wants. So that's, I think, one of the reasons why, if I had to put a number on it, at least 90% of what's available out there, especially in the coaching market when it comes to being successful as a coach is really driven toward ego. It's driven toward making money. It's driven toward getting clients, being a successful coach, but it's the satisfaction of the ego's desires that really suppresses our heart's fulfillment so often. So we have to, at the very least, understand that we've got a commitment to both of these things. And we're not saying to shut the ego out and to pretend that you don't want success, especially in business, right? And business requires money. Business requires clients. In order to have clients and bring money into a business, you have to know how to sell. There are skill sets. Absolutely. All of that stuff is 100% valid. It's just not what's going to fuel almost anybody to get over the things that this process of building a business will require us to get over. So when we hit the blocks, we hit a roadblock, and that roadblock is something emotional for us, and we think our ego's desire is going to overpower an emotional roadblock. That's why most coaches fail, is because the fuel they have to get over the bump isn't big enough. The bump's just too high. And it's because the fuel that comes out of the ego is so shallow and it's so temporary, and it's based on confirmation of self. It's based on validation of self. I was thinking earlier today, knowing we're going to have this conversation, when somebody wants to be a doctor, and I'm not going to say that some people don't want to be a doctor just to make the money, but I don't think very many people would go through what doctors have to go through if it was only to make the money. I mean, I'm sure there are some, but the people that I've talked to that want to be doctors, they want to save lives. They want to do good work. They really want to help people. And so when they're at med school and they're taking their exams and they're up for 48 straight hours and all the things that they're doing, and I'm speaking as an observer, just relating some of the stories. I've never even come close to it, but there's got to be a drive there that they remember that this is why I'm doing this, right? And if it's to cash a check or to create some kind of financial stability, if it's feeding into the ego's desire for protection, but also fear of loss, it's just not going to be that strong. And so what I want to do first here is break down these two elements, or these two goals: success versus mastery. And I'm just going to rattle off a few things from each of these, and then we can dive in. And obviously, Michelle, you've got tons of experience in, not just in the coaching world, but prior to that. And you're going to share whatever you want to share as it relates to these two things. So the way I'm defining success for the context of this conversation is that success is really a measurement. Success is how many clients you get, how much money your business has, how many high ticket programs you can sell, and what's the price of those programs. We'll get into that a little bit later. But success is this like finite measurement. It's conclusive in nature, right? So if you have a goal that's to make $100,000, let's say, you either do or you don't. It's a very simple, it's a black or white. You're either in or you're out. And once you hit the goal, you're done with the goal. Now, of course, we can set another goal, et cetera, but that's just a repetition of a finite, tangible goal. That's not this fluid process. That's just the repetition of a concluded process. And we hope that we'll still want to repeat the thing that we just did, because that's what we think is motivation, right? So we're motivated to get a goal. We hit the goal. We celebrate if we're going to do that, and we set another goal, and then we do the same thing. That's a repetitive process of a conclusive kind of energy, which is success in this case, right? And so it causes us to just try to get to the line. It causes us to identify the finish line and then do whatever we can to break through that line, because we believe that breaking through that line, the finish line moment, right? Chest out and chin forward and you're busting through the line and beating everybody else. I mean, number one, it's based on competition of everybody else, which we got to bring that up too. But it's that moment. It's the break through the tape moment that we're looking for. The problem is signing a client and making a certain dollar amount and all the tangible stuff in a business is not like the Olympics where you cross that line and then everybody showers you and you get a gold medal and all the things you want to get. And it lives, with you and makes you happy and proud for a long, long time. It's not the same thing at all. But when we think it will be that's when we're going to have a huge, huge disappointment. But our brain thinks all we got to do is get to the line. So do anything we can to get to the line. And the brain really likes specificity. So we hear this all the time with SMART goals or just any kind of goal setting, measurements and philosophies, which I agree in to a large degree. The specificity element is so critical. One of the reasons it's critical is because the unconscious mind likes specifics. The unconscious mind really works like a heat-seeking missile. So the specificity of the tangible goals is intriguing to the unconscious mind. It likes the idea that it knows exactly where it's going. But the downside to that is it hyper focuses on the specific target. And then it wants to get to the target really essentially through any means necessary, including and sometimes preferring shortcuts. Mm-hmm. If I can save energy, if I can save time, if I can save money and get to the finish line faster, who wouldn't want that? Yeah. Of course we would want that. So that's why this current in our brain, the way our brains actually work, that's why we're so drawn toward the specificity of these finish line goals, towards the measurability, the tangibleness of it. We like being able to measure stuff. So it doesn't make much sense if that's the way our brain works, that's the absolute wrong way to go. And if I was doing this podcast 15 years ago, I wouldn't be saying what I'm saying now because I didn't have the experiences of my own downfall in my business that led to bankruptcy. And I wouldn't have had 15 years of really taking a look at when did I hit my goals and when did I miss my goals, and specifically what causes other coaches to win and lose, right? What causes other coaches to keep going and other coaches and the majority of coaches to fail and to quit eventually. So it's really this collection of evidence over the last 15 years that has changed my tune around the temptation of goal setting actually being our demise. And then we're in an industry that has no rules, right? There's no regulations here. So if the medical industry didn't have any regulations, we might also see a lot of people saying, how quickly can you get somebody to pay you $50,000 to do surgery on them and not be all that good of a surgeon, right? How quickly can we get people on your table? If there were no regulations, then that industry might have some of the same challenges that our industry has, which is because there are no regulations, people are just offering what the ego wants to buy. And it makes sense. We've got this temptation. It smells good. It tastes good. It sounds good. So yeah, tell me the quickest way to make $10,000 by Friday, or the easiest platform to use, or whatever the superlative is, right? And the guarantees are, we're so drawn to that. But that lust for success is going to keep us in a cycle of failure for so many reasons. And before we dive in, I know you got about 9 hours worth of stuff to say just on what we've talked about so far. Let me give you the opposite side of mastery. Mastery is not a finish line. Mastery is a journey. Mastery is more of a concept. So if you're committed to mastery, you're essentially committed to continual improvement. There is no conclusive nature to mastery. There's a continual nature to mastery. There's this fluid commitment And you're committing to the fluidity, but there's also fluidity in the commitment, which on some level, the unconscious mind doesn't like. The unconscious mind doesn't like the uncertainty of not being able to measure, not being able to have a tape at the end of the finish line that you bust through. It doesn't like that. But if we see it in the right way and we understand it in the right way, that's the absolute best fuel to use in a journey that cannot be determined by finish lines. And we're creating a business here, and we're in the personal development world, and we're coaching humans. So if we think that we're going to have this formulaic journey that says step 1 is this, and step 2 is this, and step 10 is that, and when you take a human, you just like pretend they're a commodity, and you just shove them into your assembly line, and you do this thing to them, and you poke here, and you ask that, and then the human is transformed. That's ridiculous. That's not what we're dealing with. So when we're dealing with fluid, dynamic creatures, we can't expect static, guaranteed rules that apply to any piece of this journey. So we have to understand the conceptual nature of business creation with a product that is dynamic and creative and fluid and flexible in its very nature itself as well. So when you are more committed to mastery, success will happen as a byproduct. When you are more committed to success, mastery will always elude you. So I know we got lots of stuff that we're going to dissect further, but what's coming up for you now?
I just want to breathe like all of the stuff that you said in. The image that I had when you were talking about the race, like the race to success, is how many of us, me for sure, bust through that line, and then Sean, we just collapse from exhaustion, like we just hit the ground, and we feel like we had.
I just had the image of busting through and then face plant, because that's what it is. Total face plant, yeah.
Right. And how many times that happens in our business, right? How many times that happens when we're what's the quote, right? You can't see the forest because you're focused on the tree. And so there's so many things that we miss. And if we're going so hard and just pushing for this one goal, this X number of clients, and we're ignoring all of the other things, and we make it like, yay, but then we stop. And we collapse, and what else? Our business or the people, and that we got, right? That we got as clients. Now they're not getting served, and they end up collapsing as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. However we show up as the coach is what we're going to take our clients through.
Right.
And if we believe that happiness in life is achieved by busting through those tapes on the finish line, I mean, it only works never. And we'll just perpetuate this fallacy that human happiness comes from human accomplishment. And it just doesn't work that way.
No, only never. And I've tried. So that's
if it was possible, you would have been able
to made it happen. And I learned this actually from you, is that when it doesn't happen, when we have that drive, when we go to cross that first finish line, and then we end up feeling that sense of unfulfillment, we have that emptiness inside, then what we think we need is more success. And so then it just becomes this cycle, almost like an addiction.
It is an addiction. It is.
Right? In the brain, where if we just, because it's not either or, and you spoke to this earlier, which I love. It's not about getting the intellect out of the way or like the ego is bad. But if we start with the fulfillment, like if we start inside, if we start with our heart, if we tap into really why, what is it that we're doing this for, then use our brain to actually create those mile markers, right? Create those mini finish lines for us to celebrate along the so I want to say marathon, but that's still a race, right? But like along the bigger, the lifetime journey and commitment of mastery, really understanding that there is no end. And that for me, there was a time in my life, I was thinking about this actually before we had this conversation today, that there was a time earlier in my journey where this conversation would have been confusing to me and
Probably
trigger.
irritating, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I said triggering, like to
Yeah.
me. I needed to understand, like, well, but how will I know, right? What's the, like, when will I get there? And what is the deadline? And I didn't have the trust, like internally, I didn't trust myself through the process to really be able to be okay with the surrender, right? With the surrender versus the chase. That's a big piece for me.
Surrender versus the chase. Yeah, there's something really powerful there. And what's important to understand is that the elements that draw us towards success can be applied to mastery.
Mhm.
They just need to be applied differently.
Right.
So your question of how will I know?
Mhm.
There are ways to know, but just not the same ways to know, because we're not measuring the same things, because the same things don't matter the same way. Mastery requires redefining certain things and refocusing and reassessing. But the elements that will cause our brain to want to stay committed to the journey can still be there. They just need to be applied to different things. So I want to ask you,
Yeah.
bringing, you brought up that it would have triggered you in the past, the things that you now know, looking back on years ago, what that version of Michelle was looking for. And what she was wanting the answers to be when she asked the question, like, how will I know? I mean, it's easy to know if there's a tangible goal, right? Like you either crossed the line or you didn't. That's how you know. And if you didn't, well, then you failed. And if you did, well, then you succeeded, right? So it's also very easy to know if we're supposed to feel good or bad about ourselves. And just in general, whether we lost or won, there's a finite, like, either or binary definition that's really pleasing to the mind on some level. So how can we still use some version of how do I know as it relates to mastery? So what I would love for you to share is, what were the things that you were looking for before? And if you want to put it in a coaching context in the beginning, of your coaching journey, that's great. If not, put it however you want. But if you can, I'd love to hear that, because what were you wanting to know in terms of knowing if you're doing the right thing? I know, we talk about that all the time and have talked about that for many years with you specifically.
Yeah.
Knowing what the right thing is, or how will I know I'm doing it right, or how will I know I'm on the right track, or whatever it is. I don't even think we've mentioned right or wrong yet, but that's such a key core issue with this.
Mhm.
Versus, how would you answer that question for somebody else that's at the beginning of their journey now with what you know? How will you know? Does that make sense? I know I just like explained it a ton trying to set up the question. Uh, but essentially I'm asking this element of how will you know you're doing a good job? How does it differ when we apply it to the normal ways of being, successful or chasing success versus surrendering to mastery?
When you first started to ask the question, I received it differently, and I got like emotional. Right, I felt it right in my chest and in my throat, and my eyes watered up because I wanted to know that I was enough. Um, that's what I was chasing. in what you just asked.
So let me stop you there
Yeah.
to expand on that just a little bit. So essentially what you were searching for is enoughness, as you said. And so therefore the way you would feel like you got there, the way you would feel like you won is if you felt like you were enough. So as
Yeah.
long as you didn't feel like you were enough, well, then clearly you didn't win, or you needed to do more.
Yeah. Mhm.
Got it. So that was the target and the measurement. And, and how
I was
many times,
I was running and I was like a dog chasing my tail. Like it was in me the whole entire time. And I'm just looking like, do you have my enoughness? 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 Never. That's the answer to the question.
yeah,
How many times? Never. Never. No one else had it. No goal had it. No client had it. No teacher had it. No award had it. No certificate had it. No dollar amount had it.
yeah, that's powerful. Okay. I cut you off there just to highlight that, because that really landed with me.
Yeah.
So, well, actually, let's add one more piece to that. So if the measurement to know if you're doing enough or if you've succeeded is by feeling enough,
Mhm.
and we don't really define what that is, like, how would you know that you feel enough? Like, would you just look in the mirror one day and say, I love you? Or would the negative head talk go away? Yeah, I mean, a lot of us, I think all of us want to get to that point where we don't doubt ourselves and all that stuff, but we also haven't defined what feeling good enough actually means.
Of course.
And so since there's not a definition to the end of that chase, then exactly. Right. Wait, were you going like this or were you going like this?
Oh, I was doing this, but the other applies.
Right.
Yeah.
The other applies. Holy cow.
It's brilliant.
Bless
Like,
our
it's
hearts.
brilliant. Bless our hearts for sure. It's brilliant in its setup, right? Because it never ends. And that's like the negative side of it never ends. Not the journey is ongoing and open-ended. That's it never ends. I mean, it's literally like just being stuck on a cycle. Those, what are those dangerous, I'm gonna tell people how old we are. Those playground
Sit and
things.
spins? Oh no.
Like
Sit and spin was something different. I know what you're talking about.
like
Just
with the metal. Yeah, usually
what-
like I thought like kids
full
would
on metal, and you could get those things going like 50 miles an hour.
or
Yeah.
it's dangerous. But you couldn't stop it, right? Like once it got started, it just didn't stop until you flew off the thing. That was pretty much my life. Yeah, just holding on for dear life and going insane. Really, like I said, chasing something that no other thing had. And even if I think for me, it just well, let me finish that thought. Even if it did, I wouldn't have known it. I wouldn't have recognized it
Right.
because of what you just said. Because of what you just said, because there was no definition. And if my belief was I am not enough, even though I was striving to find that, I didn't do anything to shift the belief. So even when I received the evidence, it didn't resonate. So it just like passed right over me. I didn't grab it. I didn't catch it.
Yeah. And a lot of coaches at a deeper level are trying to succeed for their enoughness.
Oh yeah.
They're really trying to get clients to give themselves the experience of being enough, or the illusion of being enough. And if 0 clients means you're not enough, 1 client will still mean you're not enough. And then 2 clients will mean you're not enough. And if 2 clients means you're not enough, then 20 clients is still going to mean you're not enough. But now you have evidence of what you're searching for, but it's still not giving you that feeling that you're looking for. And that's, I think, what is that, whatever that playground wheel of death is called. I think we just renamed it. That's really what it is. That's the experience of never being able to get off of that thing. And you mentioned addiction, and it really truly works like an addiction because there's just one more. If I could just get one more thing, if I could get one more dollar amount, if I could get one more client, if I could just hit one more goal, if I could just do that one more thing, then I'll be happy, or then I'll be successful. And it's the nature of the essence of success in this light, being thought of in this way and defined in this way, the way society does it. That is the problem. So you're not going to find what you're looking for when you're in the wrong play box, right? And sandbox or playground. I mashed those two together. When you're in the wrong sandbox, there is no way to win there. You've got to understand where you are. So I jumped in a few minutes ago. You were talking about the way you initially received the question, and then you were starting to say how you did the second time. So please continue.
Please ask me the question again.
Yeah. What would you tell somebody? Yeah. The whole conversation of how will I know?
Yeah.
What would you tell somebody that wants to understand, mastery, wants to commit to mastery, but still has the desire to know that they're doing a good job, to know that they're doing the right thing, to know that they're checking things off their list, whatever it is that the brain truly wants to be able to acknowledge and measure?
Yeah. What I did was really powerful, was actually on a coaching call with you. I had to redefine what right meant for me. And then it was actually a few years later, recently this year, that I redefined what wrong was. And I had to create my own definitions of what those words meant, and then operate from that place. So for me, when I redefined right, it was about what felt good to me in the moment that I made the choice. If it felt good to me, if I felt that it was an aligned choice or action to take, then it was the right thing to do. And as long as I was moving from that space, then I knew that I was making progress. So it has to be internal. The first on, it was external. I was looking for other people to give me that, right? I was looking for approval externally. I was looking for a validation in, you call them vanity metrics, right? In dollar amounts or numbers of clients, or, likes, comments, engagements on videos and posts, etc. And now it's about, does it feel good to me? Is this the message that I want to say, that I want to express, the thing that lights me up? And if so, then it's the right thing.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And you can still look at the vanity stuff. So you can still put out the video that you want to share, or write the poem that you want to share, and then notice that this poem got 50 pieces of engagement and this poem got 40, and then take a look at, from a marketing standpoint, if you want more people in the funnel and all that stuff, then yeah, you look at the metrics. But when the metrics are the standard for success, or the standard for right or wrong, now we're screwed, because the metrics actually come after the action. And so if we're waiting to know the right thing to do before we do it, but the only way to know the right thing is the thing that's going to give you the results that you want, well, now you're in the future predicting business. And now you're way more susceptible to people that tell you that they can help you predict the future, such as guarantees and turnkeys and assembly line approaches. So you use the word progress a moment ago. I'm so self-conscious, by the way, when I'm speaking and I touch my nose. So I just had this scratch on my nose. I was talking to somebody a few months back, and he was really into, he had told me that he's like really into something somatic, right? Like, all the different body movements and the body things that we do and so forth. And I was talking, and I scratched my nose, and he just called it out. I forget what it is right now, but he said, what's that?
I said, you don't know what it is?
I forget now, but it was something about, like, I don't know, something in the insecurity realm, right? Like, oh, scratching your nose means you're insecure about what you just said, or something like that. So now every time I go to scratch my nose when I'm talking, I think about that. Also, by the way, speaking of scratching noses, subscribe to the channel so that you can, you can dive into many more of these conversations and find out so much more about all of my other insecurities, because there are a lot. But the only way you're going to hear about all of them if you watch all the videos, and you got to get notified. So subscribe to the channel. That's a perfect segue.
It was hella smooth.
Hella smooth and really effective in causing me to forget what I was saying. Progress. So one of the things that we've dissected around just, this whole concept of being successful and focusing on mastery and improving and personal development, all that stuff, is that there are really two roads to take. And the road of success, the way that we're talking about it, is a road of results and recognition. And you already talked about the recognition. Recognition comes from external, right? Other people need to recognize you. The reason that this road is so dangerous is because we're not in control of it. Other people need to be there to watch our videos. Other people need to hear what we have to say. Other people need to consume the thing that we put out, and then they have to tell us about it. And we have to have the results that we're looking for based on the measurements that we've been talking about. And we're not in control of those either. We're never in control of who's going to give us their decision, right? We're never in control that somebody's going to say yes to a coaching package, or somebody's going to like a video, or whatever it is that we're measuring. So the inherent nature of being out of control around the standards that we're seeking is the breakdown, because the human never wants to commit to something that he or she knows, even if I do everything I can, I still might not win, right? So the human wants to be in control of their success. The opposite of results and recognition is one of the words you said: progress and process. Progress is still being able to measure, but you're measuring movement. You're not necessarily measuring some preconceived standard of success. So if you're moving faster, if you're moving further, if you're doing something that you want to do more often, or doing something that you don't want to do less often than you used to, that's progress. And then mastery comes in with the process. What is the process of mastery? We talk about this 10,000 hours concept. I don't remember what that is from, if it's from a book or just some old conceptual understanding. I'm not sure. But, the whole idea is it takes about 10,000 hours to become a master at things that are creative in nature, such as playing an instrument, or, maybe creating, writing, things like that. And the writer or the piano player or the singer or anybody that is committed to creative mastery does not need to be successful out of the gate, because they understand that they've committed to a 10,000 hour journey, and the number of hours doesn't matter. It's the journey, and having value, seeking and feeling value in the process of progress. That's mastery. And if you keep progressing, you will succeed. You cannot be a really, truly masterful coach that can change people's lives and not get clients. You can't, unless you make sure that nobody knows what you do. Like, you would have to get in your way and intentionally make sure that nobody hears your mouth making the sounds that it makes when it has the mastery of transformation embodied in its tongue. You need to make sure that you don't let anybody know that you can change their lives in order for you to not get clients. Because there's a certain point where mastery works on itself. It's kind of that same concept of, the wheel of death, but in the positive way. It creates a cycle of value and a cycle of attraction, because mastery cannot be denied. And I know you see this, you recognize it. And one of the reasons you recognize it is because you've gone through this journey where now you're seeing and you're hearing people want you to keep talking. And I know there was a point in time not too long ago where you didn't recognize your own value as a teacher.
Right.
You didn't recognize how powerful your words were because you were focused on the continual education, the continual progress. You know, now at a point, we need to understand, especially if you want to be a coach or you want to build a business, like you got to understand there's a point at which people need to know about you, right? But you were so focused on mastery, you looked up one day and really didn't recognize how powerful you were. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually that Buddha. He's in, I don't know the specifics like of the name of the stance, but it represents the student, the flow of the student and the teacher, which is why that's here in my office. And to what you just said, that's what that's what I hear when you say what you said at the very beginning, which is if you're committed to mastery, you will literally trip over $100,000 and honestly not even really realize until somebody else is like, you're laying in $100,000. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, well, that's cool. And then you still get up. And that's not that there's no celebration, like, but it's not the point of the journey. Yeah, I wasn't doing what I was doing so that I could get on stage or so that I could get in front of the room or so that I could get anything. It started initially for me, for my own like personal journey. And then it just became so that I can give, like who else needs to feel this, know this, experience this. And that's what's been the bigger drive for me until somebody said, hey, did you want to come up here and start telling people about that?
Yeah. And I think that's why your journey was so organic.
Mm.
Well, maybe I'll say it's so powerful because it was organic,
Mm.
because you weren't learning things to get a client. You were learning things to understand it, to change your life and to be able to change other people's lives. And it's that come from, it's the point of the journey. Like you said, what's the actual point? And when we were talking about this a few days ago, it brought me back to school, right? If the point of school is to get A's, you can do that by consuming information and then just regurgitating it on the test.
Mm.
It's what I did most of my school career in most of my classes. I got one non-A in my entire school career. Up until college, I got a C in college as well. So I guess I got 2 non-A's in my entire school career, including college. They were both C's, by the way. So I guess I've never gotten a B. But the point was to just get A's on the test and get A's on the report card. So I didn't retain hardly anything. I didn't retain hardly anything in history, especially. Didn't retain much in science. I retained a lot in math because I was just interested in it. But the point was consume and regurgitate. Consume and regurgitate. So what that means is I only need a skill in order to achieve the thing that I'm wanting to achieve, in order to get the outcome. And as soon as I have the outcome, I no longer need the skill. As soon as I have the information and I get an A on the test, I no longer need to retain the information. And that's not how mastery works. Mastery actually doesn't care about getting the A's on the test. And because it doesn't care about the A's on the test, it will usually get A's on the test, because what it really truly cares about is the improvement and the embodiment and the point of what we're doing here. And so as a coach, if you really want to be a damn good coach, then act like it. Commit to that. Commit to your constant and never-ending improvement as a coach, and study what changes people's lives, not what get people to hire you.
Mm. Mm.
Right? They need to sit back on that one for a second. Damn. That one just disrupted me.
Somebody got their feelings hurt.
And you know, you and I feel the same way. Like, whether it sounds cheesy or not, like we get offended when the point of people getting into this journey is to take money out of other people's wallets. And I know very few people would say that that is their main intention. But if we take a look at the programs we buy, the things that we value, the recipes that we follow, so much of it is, how can I make money? And I don't think you deserve the money if that's the main point. I don't. And people can tell also. So there are a lot of really, really good coaches or good people trying to be good coaches, and they're just on the wrong path of how can I get clients? What's the fastest way? What's the quickest way? What's the easiest way? What's the most guaranteed way? And the reason that many of you, if you fall into this category, are struggling is because you're just misaligned with your point. The thing that drives you is not the thing that you're focusing on. And if you're focused on a thing that doesn't really truly drive you, I think conceptually we can say you don't deserve that thing anyway. But in this industry, focusing on a thing that you're not driven by will cause your soul to just sit down when your ego is playing all these games about how can I get clients? How can I just shortcut my way to success? And it feels, you know, it's kind of like the tortoise and the hare idea, right? It feels like we're going slow. It's not that we're going slow. It's that we're focused on foundation. And if you have a building to build and you want this building to be really tall, the first thing you do is go downward. You have to build into the ground first before you have the foundation to build up. And that's what so many coaches are not doing. They're not going inward to themselves. They're not focused on mastery enough. And if you're committed to being a really, really good coach, you can be an awful salesperson, the worst. And people will ask you if you take American Express, right? They will ask you where to pay. And I'm sure you've had this happen where you were in a conversation and probably weren't even realized, you know, you didn't even realize you were in a sales conversation until somebody asked you if they could pay you.
Yeah, recently.
Right. Yeah. Because the point in that moment is mastery. The point in that moment is really helping people change their lives. Now, this isn't an either or conversation. You said that a couple of times. I think it's important to remind everyone of that. When you're focused on mastery, you can absolutely learn sales skills. You can absolutely set goals for your business and break those goals down and have tasks and have projects and have all the things that the mind really likes in the process of chasing success. But if it sits inside of the much bigger commitment toward mastery, now you've got a winning combination. But if it's the opposite, if you're hoping mastery happens in the middle of a bigger commitment to check the boxes and it knock off the goals and to satisfy your ego, it's just not going to happen. And I know you've spent so much time on the phone with people, and sometimes, I mean, you and I've been damn near in tears, like, she's so good, or he's so good. They're so good. But they're chasing the path. They're chasing the shortcut path. And if we fall prey to the temptations of success, only outcome is failure. Either failure through failure or failure through success. And the second one is worse. Because when you fail through success, meaning you fail by succeeding, you fail your heart by succeeding with your head, you lose hope in that journey. Because if you succeed according to all the things you're supposed to succeed at to make you feel good and you don't feel good, well, then what do you do next? At a certain point, there isn't a one more to go. At a certain point, you just hit a ceiling and you either quit or quit something, right? You quit the business, you quit yourself, you quit being happy, you quit expecting or believing in what's possible. It's just this, like, I don't know, just this shrinking kind of, tunnel vision sort of commitment to these minute goals, right? The tangible, like I obviously I'm fumbling over my words here because it's the essence of the breakdown of the human spirit that this leads to. And that's what is so incredibly sad. But when success is icing on the cake, but fulfillment and mastery is the cake, there's nothing you can't achieve. And there's this really powerful and positive self introspection element here. And it's not a I'm not good enough kind of thing, but it's I've got more to go. I've got more people to help. I've got more skills to develop. And when the commitment is really toward the constant evolution of your mastery, then there's also always something to give you the experience of progress as well. Because everything that really matters is essentially internal. And then the external stuff is great. I know you've gone through this journey. We're just having this conversation with somebody else too. If you have something to write and you approve of it, if you validate it first, then everybody else's validation is just, oh, by the way. Yeah. Oh, by the way, they like it too. Oh, by the way, he didn't like it. Okay, great. If anything, that's just confirmation. Apparently I didn't write it for him. Awesome. And I know you've experienced this so often that if we put something out there and the more truthful it is, the more tender it is for most of us. If we put it out there and somebody doesn't like it, that's usually confirmation that it's really good. Right. And that person is just not the person that you're looking for. Now, if that person is the person that you've identified is you're a seeker and you're committed to helping them out and they don't like it, well, that's a whole nother thing, but it's like impossible for that to happen. If you're aligned with who your seeker is and you do something that you really feel good about, the seeker is going to like it because it's coming from you and you're already in this place of alignment. But just going back to the whole theme of this conversation, if you commit to mastery, then no matter what happens, there's a pivot. No matter what outcome you produce, like you said a while ago, you trip over $100,000 and you don't stop and turn around and then, celebrate in this way that like I've finally arrived, because there are plenty of other people that you haven't touched yet. There are plenty of other things that you haven't developed yet. And so, yes, you can acknowledge the success, but you got to keep going. And that's not going to be difficult, because if your fulfillment is not found in the $100,000, then laying in a bed of $100,000 isn't going to be what your soul wants to do anyway. Right. So the way that we think success is, and one of the reasons that so many of us think, what we're talking about is not the way to go, it's a function of the way we've been programmed. And unfortunately, so much of that is just simply wrong. So we think if we change the way we operate, it won't work. But that's using the standards of what works from the other road, right? From the other focus on success. And one of the things that's really difficult about this is it just takes a little bit of faith. And I think it's tough for us to believe in things that go so against what we've been not just programmed, but what a lot of us have even taught. We teach this goal setting journey, right? We teach this. And yet we're telling ourselves we got to trust that if we focus on mastery, we're going to trip over $100,000. There's a surrender, to use your word from earlier, there's a surrender that's required there. And if any of you are doubting what we're saying because you're thinking, well, that's not going to work and that didn't work for me in the past or whatever, prove us wrong. Prove it wrong. I don't personally know anybody who committed to mastery and didn't become a phenomenal coach in the process and then didn't get successful unless they simply didn't try. I mean, do you know anybody who's a masterful coach and they've gotten into action and they failed? I mean, we're not saying that, your first video is going to be seen by 100,000 people or the first program you put out there is immediately going to be a success. So there's still no such thing as guaranteed, and definitely no guaranteed overnight success. But mastery is a magnet that just can't be denied. I know I asked you a question, didn't give you the chance to answer it, but I'll do it in a second. But the story that you know well is that's so powerful inside this conversation is I was talking to a man a while back, and he had experienced a really debilitating injury when he was in high school football, and he was super depressed, and he had a full ride scholarship to go to a college, and they pulled it because of his injury. And he was really depressed, and he was talking to a friend of his, and he couldn't go to any of these big schools. And so there was one school that he was looking at, but nobody had ever made it to the NFL from that school. And his friend said, if you can play, they'll find you. And when I heard that message several years ago, I knew it was powerful, but I didn't understand where it would fit. Because for whatever reason, like it just wasn't, I wasn't in this conversation. And then maybe a year or two ago, it came back to me. It's like, oh, that's this right here. If you can play, they'll find you. That's mastery. That's commitment to mastery. And by the way, he did become the first person ever, and probably since, to make it to the NFL going through that particular school because he focused on mastery. He got to the point where people couldn't not pay attention to him because he could play. So I asked you a question, and if it's relevant anymore, you can still answer it, or you can.
The answer to your question is no. I don't know.
Perfect.
Yeah. It's in your cells, right? Like, I don't even think you have to say anything, although I do think that you should, right? Like there's a conversation around marketing and putting your message out there.
For sure.
But you don't even have to say anything. Like it's just who you are, right? Like you said, they couldn't not look at him. They couldn't not, because it was him, right? Like it just oozed.
It was too valuable. That's what this conversation is really about, is value. And if your value is high enough, you can't not get clients unless you're determined to, unless you're determined not to.
Yeah.
Like you have to hide yourself from people.
Right.
It might not happen immediately. Of course, there are all kinds of things, like you said, to understand branding and messaging and all that stuff, but it's really value. So he raised his value to the point where they couldn't not take him because he was just too valuable. Now, if he would have done all that on the playground and never played football and nobody ever could find him, then yeah, he would have never made it to the NFL. And that's, what's possible, I guess. Coaches could be really, really valuable, but then not say anything, like you said a little while ago. And yeah, okay, then, because people are not going to show up at your door and walk in and ask you to coach them. So there's obviously got to be some marketing elements, and you got to take action. But so many people are looking for the right action to take when they're not committed to being the most valuable coach they could be first.
Then every action is the wrong action.
Yeah. Say that again.
Yeah. Every action is the wrong action. You're coming from the wrong place.
If you're coming from the wrong place, every action is the wrong action.
Mm-hmm.
And the flip side of that, I think, is true. If you're coming from the right place, every action is the right action because it gets you in motion. And even if it doesn't produce the outcome that you want to produce, that doesn't make it the wrong action. And especially if the right thing is, does it feel good to you, as you said, then you did the right thing and just didn't get the outcome that you wanted. So now do another right thing and then check the outcome from that one. And then do another right thing and check the outcome from that one. I don't remember if there was a moment in time with you and I, but I feel like this was a real pivotal moment for you. Or I know I've had many versions of this where like I looked back on a certain amount of time, whether it's a few months or a few years, and I thought, what have I not done during that time? Because I've been waiting for the right action to take.
Excuse me, I'm really busy perfecting the irrelevant.
Yes. If you're coming from the right place, then every action is the right action. If you're coming from the wrong place, every action is the wrong action. And I would say every result is the wrong result, even if it's the right result.
Mm-hmm.
It's the wrong result because you're coming from the wrong place.
Yeah.
And so if people are committed to foundational mastery, they can build an insanely powerful business and a very profitable business by doing the right things from a marketing standpoint, learning and branding and all that stuff. Like, we keep saying this over and over again. We're not saying this is not an either or conversation. This is just sequence and stack, what's stacked on top of what and what's most important to you.
And I think it happens faster. Actually, I know it happens faster. It happens faster because if my self-esteem is wrapped up in every single post that I make, let's just say, and that's what I'm actually posting on Facebook, right? Is my self-esteem, not something that I wrote or some image that I created. Then if somebody doesn't like it, now I need to be in the corner and lick my wounds and comfort myself and get myself the courage to get back up again. Where if I loved it, even if somebody doesn't love it, to your point earlier, I'm much more able to assess more quickly and then take another right action so much faster when my self-esteem isn't attached to it. So even though it seems faster just by what we see, right? Like, oh, in 30 days or 20 days or 3 minutes, or by the end of this week, you'll get this thing. It's actually, when we look at the big picture, it goes so much faster because then it's not a short-term success with a long-term recovery because of the failure wrapped up inside the success that I then had to get myself to try. So in this time that these other people have maybe purchased these 3, 4, 5 different quick fix programs, I've just done the work and have the results.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Is that it actually usually does happen faster when we're in it for the long haul.
Yeah.
And this external validation piece is such a critical component to highlight. And this comes up everywhere, when we coach people in so many different areas of their life. When we're constantly needing to get the external validation, we're constantly needing to get the approval, from somebody else or from something else, then we're unstable, because again, we're committing to something that is not in our control. Whereas the internal game of mastery is about improving, right? So success is about the commitment to approval. Mastery is about the commitment to improval. Constantly improving self, improving value, improving skills, constantly improving. And that commitment to constant improval will get a lot of approval, but it won't matter. And it will get other people to disapprove, and it really won't matter, because the main come from is mastery. The main come from is improval. And this puts us in a place of personal responsibility more, which on some level, we don't love the idea of, if it feels like, we suck or we're at fault or something like that. But it actually is the most empowering state for us to be in our life, because if we're responsible for something, then we can control the outcome, right? If we're responsible for our income, if we're responsible for our business, if we're responsible for improving our skills, if we're responsible for improving our mastery, then we have control over doing something that will produce progress. If we're not responsible for the outcome, then we really can't predictably produce progress. And that's ultimately what our unconscious mind craves. Maybe not ultimately, but one of the main things that our unconscious mind really, truly craves. And one final thing here, for now, for this video.
Yeah, subscribe
you said,
for more.
yes, subscribe for more. Subscribe or you won't get this next, the other stuff. You said right before we started recording here that this really is a masculine feminine conversation. The masculine is what desires the ego goals, but also the tangible nature of right, wrong, good, bad, yes, no. That's the masculine. And while there are a lot of things that masculine force is effective and powerful for, business creation is not one of them, at least in the fuel for most of us to focus on what is it that we ultimately really truly want. And so creation itself, just the idea of creation, the entity of creation, is much more feminine. It's much more flow, fluidity, not knowing. That's one of the big pieces, right? We already talked a little bit about, how can you know what the right thing to do is? We got to redefine that. The feminine energy actually plays off not knowing. It's not afraid of, not only is it not afraid of the ignorance, which is just stuff that we don't currently know, but it actually fuels itself by the exploration of the ignorance. So if we're willing to dive into the area that we don't know, that's a feminine act. That's a creative act. And I believe in my journey personally, and just taking a look at what causes coaches to succeed or fail, the coaches who can only be committed to known actions, meaning we know the outcome and we know it's going to be the right thing and we know exactly what it's going to produce, they can't win, because it's literally impossible. They're expecting and demanding something that's impossible. So there's this piece of business creation, specifically as a coach, of ignorant commitment that you have to have. You have to be able to be committed to the ignorant, and committed while you're ignorant being defined as I just don't know. So is anybody going to buy this program? I don't know. I'm not doing it only for people to buy it. I'm doing it for mastery. Are a bunch of people going to watch this video? I don't know. I'm not doing it for them. I'm doing it for mastery. I'm doing it for the people who do want to see it. And if we can be committed to the unknown like that, then we can succeed in an endeavor that is inherently unknowable. But if we can only commit to the things that we know in the future, then we can't win in an inherently unknowable endeavor, which this absolutely is. And I know this is a big piece of your story and journey, Michelle, just because, the desire and the craving of knowing is so strong, but it's really not a commitment to doing the right thing as much as it's a commitment to not doing the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as you're committed to not doing the wrong thing, everything will be wrong. Because even if you do the right thing, you won't enjoy it. It won't give you that feeling of enoughness. It won't even give you the feeling of success, because your whole drive is just to not fail.
Right.
And if your drive is to not fail, you can make $100,000 not failing and not even experience it as success, not even enjoy it, not have any happiness with it. There's an emptiness to the chase driven by not failing.
When even if you win at not failing.
Right.
Like there's not even success, or happiness isn't even a part of that. So just like linguistically, like there is no success in not failing. There is no right in not being wrong. Like, yay, I'm not wrong. So what are you? And I think it has to be a conscious commitment to the ignorant. Not like a passive surrender, like, oh well, okay, I guess I'll move forward. I think there's an energy around that declaration, right? Of I genuinely do not know. Let's go find out.
Let's do it anyway. Yeah, let's go find out. That's a really good point. It's got to be conscious, that commitment. So if there's anything that you want support around, please reach out. We talk about some deep stuff, and sometimes it triggers people, but your journey on this planet and your journey in business is always going to come down to your relationship with self and your relationship with all these other things. So if there's anything that we can support you with, click the link in the description and jump on the phone. We do free consultations so that we can help you identify what, if anything, is really holding you back. What are the next steps that you need to take to get to wherever it is that you want to go? And we're happy to provide that support openly and transparently and freely. So what would you say, like just what's in your heart to conclude this conversation with? What do you want people to walk away with knowing?
It's worth it. Yeah, it's worth it. You're worth it. And they're worth it. And it doesn't have to make sense yet. You don't have to understand really most of what we talked about on this video, and you can still make that commitment to keep showing up, to keep stepping forward, to keep taking that action. I imagine that if you're still listening to this at this point, then you are somebody who wants to be committed to mastery, even if you're not there yet, that you want that. So celebrate that and stay with that commitment. You don't have to understand. You can make the conscious commitment to take the next step anyway.
And what I'll add to that is, not only is it worth it, it's possible for everybody. If you follow somebody else's recipe for success, it might not be possible for you.
Yeah.
Because you're different than them And if your energy is different, if your product is different, if the people you're trying to help are different, then their recipe might literally be impossible for you to succeed with. So it's a crapshoot focusing on success. But everybody can become masterful. Everybody can continue to improve in their own journey. So it's possible and it's worth it.
Now, if you like this video, check out that video where we break down the 10 deep dive coaching techniques that will absolutely transform your clients' lives. If you listen to how somebody talks, you'd be amazed at what you can really pick up. You can pick up when they're smiling. You can pick up the rhythm of their language. You can pick up when they withdraw a little bit energetically or when they get more animated and activated.